Deadpool and Wolverine is releasing next month, and it got me thinking a lot about the MCU. And the main question I've been thinking about is, what is the most underrated movie in the MCU? I asked you, and got some pretty interesting answers. I think there are a few options for me personally, but today, the one I would like to talk about is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Spoilers. This film marked the return of Sam Raimi to the superhero genre for the first time in 15 years. Finally, the man who made the GOAT comic book movie has come back. Back to superheroes. Back to push the MCU along in its post-Endgame haze. Back to lend his unique voice and vision to the genre that in real time was losing its firm grasp at the top of the cultural mountain. And when fans heard the title Multiverse of Madness, they dove into the theory pools thinking about which cameos they could see or what next great event this movie could pivot the MCU towards. Meanwhile, I sat there like a kid the night before Christmas hoping for magic. You see, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is my favorite movie of all time. And of course, Multiverse of Madness didn't have to be as good, but I wanted the same flavors. So the question remained, would there be the classic camp, horror, and energy of a Raimi hero picture? The answer? Yes. Well, mostly. My biggest fear for this movie seemed to be correct when I heard Raimi in an interview say that this wasn't a Raimi movie, but a Marvel project that he was navigating. And I might as well get this out of the way. My least favorite parts of the movie were those moments where you could actually feel him try to navigate it. That's why I can't definitively say this is the most underrated. It does have some glaring flaws. That second act is when the movie drags the most, and that to me seemed like the navigation. I get that people were excited to see Patrick Stewart in the MCU, and admittedly, I was too. I popped when I heard Danny Elfman use the music from the 90s show. I gasped when I saw John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. But you know what got me even more excited? When I got to see the Scarlet Witch go full Evil Dead and execute them all so we could get back to the story being told. And when that story is being told, it's very effective. But I wanted more. God, I wish this movie were longer. Longer so I could get more of the quiet moments where these characters can just be real people. Scenes of laughter and heartbreak. But where this movie may stumble in conventional superhero wants, it soars in its themes and dynamic filmmaking. Part of what makes this a complicated movie to talk about is that it's a story of two forces. The one being the classic MCU formula that people had come to know and love. And the other is Raimi's creative vision. It doesn't have the typical Marvel storytelling method. This one flips it right on its head. A lot of MCU flicks focus on the hero and almost treat the villains as an afterthought. But this one is also just as much about the antagonist and the person behind the lens. This movie is more akin to a horror classic than an MCU film, and that's when the movie is at its best, when it's embracing that. And it's also classic Raimi where even a good person, or a hero, can be turned if given the right circumstances. And let's talk about that person for a second. The Scarlet Witch is one of the best villains the MCU has ever had. She's a terrifying force of nature that, at times, had my jaw on the floor. Not many Marvel movies outright position their villain as a terrifying monster. But you know Raimi has no problem doing that, all while presenting the character as at least slightly sympathetic. Having Wanda become a villain is such a bold choice in my opinion, considering she was one of the most popular characters Marvel had left at that point. But if you actually paid attention to WandaVision, it does kind of make sense. And this is not Wanda now. This is the Scarlet Witch, because Wanda is broken. Through all the pain, all the lies, all the loss, and all the blame, Wanda Maximoff lost herself. And now she can only find happiness in the children that she never truly had, no matter the cost, because Wanda is broken. And while I love the campy one-liners, the incredible camera movement, and the dynamic transitions, especially during heavy exposition, what stood out to me the most about this film are both the questions it asks and the way it positions the characters. We get a good amount of reflections in this film, whether it be in the face of a broken watch, which we will talk about more later, or a glass wall, or when Strange and Wanda meet, interact, and learn from variant versions of themselves throughout the multiverse. Raimi has always done an incredible job of positioning both his protagonist and his antagonist as reflections of one another to ask them the same questions. In Spider-Man 1, he asks Peter and Norman what to do with power. In Spider-Man 2, he asks both Peter and Otto if they should sacrifice what they want for the betterment of others. In Spider-Man 3, he asks Peter and Harry if they can forgive. And in Multiverse of Madness, he asks Steven and Wanda something too. The question he asks out loud is, "Are you happy?" But he whispers a lot more questions. How does sacrifice affect us? What if those sacrifices meant nothing? Can we accept help? Can we prove our doubters wrong? What if we disappoint the ones we love? What do we do when we can't achieve our dreams? Can you accept the way life turned out if it isn't how you imagined? Does reality become a nightmare then? And can that break us? Should you be selfish in the pursuit of those dreams, of happiness? You often hear from successful people that it took a lot of sacrifices to get them where they are. Well, what if those sacrifices weren't just personal ones? Is it okay to be as selfish as possible sometimes? Should your happiness come at the expense of others? In typical Sam Raimi fashion, the right lessons are learned and the villain atones through sacrifice. But what I found most interesting here was Stephen Strange. This is a character who we've seen be arrogant and selfish, and that selfishness has caused the pain of someone he cared about. And honestly, I wasn't sure what we'd get with that type of person as the lead in a Raimi picture. Well, I did have one idea. But in all seriousness, when Doctor Strange looks into the broken face of that watch, we can of course see that Steven is broken. This man once spent his life fixing people and has now become someone who might be destined to break them. Even though he sacrificed for others before, we've heard about his variants going back to his selfish ways on an even grander scale. But at the end of the film, we see Steven resurrect the body of his variant, who we first see make a very selfish decision. And in that body, rather than take America's power for himself, he encourages her to use it and instills confidence in her. Once again, becoming a fixer, a healer, a hero. And at the very end, Strange fixes that broken watch. Now, does that mean he's never going to break again? No. We've seen him do it before, and it'll likely happen again. But isn't that life? It's a constant journey of making mistakes, learning, and trying to do better. If we're being honest, sometimes it does take a bit of real self-reflection to truly let a lesson sink in. In that way, I guess maybe we're all a little broken. And we are absolutely all a little strange. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video, and be sure to comment your thoughts down below. I'd love to know what you think the most underrated MCU movie is, and I'd love to know your thoughts on the Multiverse of Madness. I may do more videos on underrated movies in and outside the MCU, so be sure to subscribe to catch them when I do, and for all future videos. Be well, and I'll see you again next time.